Welcome to Relative Our Family Mess. This is a dedicated space where we explore the deeper dimensions of life, focusing on true strength, timeless resilience, and the compelling stories that shape a man's journey. If you appreciate substantive, impactful content and refined perspectives, you are in the right place. Without further ado, I welcome you to today's new video. At 2:17 in the morning, I woke on the bathroom floor with blood running down the side of my face and my daughter's name caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. The tile was cold the way tile gets in October in Savannah. Not freezing, just indifferent. I had hit the edge of the sink on the way down. I knew that without touching the wound, because I had spent 42 years understanding what the body sounds like when it strikes something it was not meant to strike. "Sloan," I said. My voice carried through the dark hallway and up the staircase and into every room that was not sealed shut. Nothing. "Sloan." Louder, from above me, through the ceiling. I heard laughter, low and unhurried, the kind that belongs to people who are comfortable and have no intention of being disturbed. A second voice murmured something, and she laughed again. I called her phone. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. I pressed a bedsheet against my head and stared at the ceiling. They were awake. They had heard me. The next morning, when Harriet, the nurse I had trusted for 8 years before my daughter fired her, appeared at the top of the stairs and saw the dried blood and the bruise spreading across my temple. She knelt beside me and whispered, "Dr. Mercer, the pills she has been giving you, they are not what you think they are. If you found your way here today, I am glad you did. Tell me in the comments what city or country you are joining from. It means something to know who is listening. Some elements of this story are fictional, included for depth and understanding. Names and settings are not drawn from any specific source, but the truth inside the story is something I believe you will recognize. I want to tell you about a Wednesday morning in October, because that was the morning everything still looked exactly the way it was supposed to look. My name is Franklin Mercer. I am 71 years old. I spent 42 years as a cardiovascular surgeon at Savannah Memorial, which means I spent 42 years holding other people's hearts in my hands and deciding whether those hearts kept beating. I retired 3 years ago, 4 months after Catherine passed. I closed my practice, donated my surgical library to the medical school, and moved through the rooms of the house on Whitaker Street, the way you move through a building after the person who made it home is no longer in it. Catherine had planted the garden the year Sloan was born. Roses along the fence, jasmine near the kitchen window, a magnolia in the far corner that shaded the entire south wall. She tended it every morning for 31 years. I had loved watching her. I had never once helped, which she found amusing and I found reasonable, given that my hands were trained for other things. Sloan moved back 14 months after the funeral. She said she was worried about me. She said the house was too large for one person. I said yes. Of course I said yes. She was my daughter. That Wednesday morning, Sloan had the camera set up on the kitchen counter, the small one she used for social media to document what she called our journey together. When she saw me on the stairs, her face transformed into something bright and effortless. "There he is," she said to the camera. "Dr. Franklin Mercer. Up before 8. We are making progress." "People," I laughed. I sat down. I let her film me eating eggs and asking about my plans, and I felt genuinely lucky. My daughter was here. My daughter had chosen to be here. "How are you feeling?" she asked, setting a plate in front of me. "Any dizziness? You seemed off balance on the porch yesterday." "I was fine on the porch," I said. "You grabbed the railing." "I always grab the railing. Your mother installed it specifically so people would grab it." She smiled and squeezed my hand, and the camera caught it. The light from the window made the shot look warm. It looked exactly like love. Then her phone buzzed. Something shifted in her face so quickly I almost missed it. She reached over and turned the camera off. The kitchen felt different without it. Same room, same light, same eggs. But the air changed the way air changes in an operating room, when the anesthesiologist looks up from the monitors, and you know before anyone speaks that the numbers have moved in the wrong direction. "You need to take your second pill," she said. Her voice was different. Not cold. Efficient. The voice she used for contractors and billing departments. "I took it with the first one," I said. "Dr. Harmon said to space them out." "Dad." She set her coffee down harder than necessary. "I do not have time for this. I have a call at 9. Just take the pill." She was already scrolling her phone, already somewhere else. I swallowed the pill because it was easier than not swallowing it. And I told myself she was tired. She was busy. She was doing so much for me. I was very good at telling myself things like that. Later, I went to the room that had been Catherine's study, the one with the bay window overlooking the garden. I sat at her desk and noticed the lab report from my last blood panel, the one Sloan had scheduled 2 weeks earlier. I had glanced at it and set it aside the way you do with familiar documents when you trust the system that produced them. That morning, I read it the way I had read 42 years of pre-operative panels, not scanning for normalcy, but searching for the single value that did not belong. I found it in the hepatic panel, then a second anomaly in the neurological markers. I sat very still at Catherine's desk, with the lab report in my hands and the garden going gold outside the window. And I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Not fear. Something quieter and more precise. The feeling a surgeon gets when the incision reveals something that was not on the scan. Something that has been growing in the dark, patient and undetected, for longer than anyone knew. I read the lab report 3 times. Not because I doubted what I was seeing, but because 42 years of clinical discipline had taught me that the distance between what you think you see and what is actually there is the distance in which people die. You do not rush a reading. You do not assume. You sit with the numbers and let them tell you what they mean. The hepatic enzymes were elevated, not dramatically, not in the range that would trigger an automatic flag from a general practitioner reviewing routine panels, but elevated in a pattern I recognized. It was the pattern I had seen in patients who had been administered sedatives over a sustained period. The liver metabolizes what the body is given, and it leaves its fingerprints in the blood work for anyone trained enough to read them. The neurological markers told the same story from a different angle. Subtle suppression in the cholinergic indicators, the kind of suppression that, over weeks or months, would produce symptoms indistinguishable from early cognitive decline. Confusion, slowed recall, difficulty with sequential reasoning. The exact symptoms that Sloan had been mentioning to me with increasing frequency. The exact symptoms she had been documenting on her phone and describing to Dr. Harmon at every appointment she insisted on attending. I set the report down and pressed my palms flat on Catherine's desk and looked at the garden through the window. The magnolia was beginning to turn, the leaves going from green to bronze at the edges, in the slow way that savanna trees surrender to autumn. not all at once but gradually, as though they are negotiating the terms. I thought about Harriet Dawson. 8 years she had worked as my private nurse after I turned 63, and Catherine insisted I needed someone with clinical training nearby. Harriet was 58, meticulous, professionally unflappable, and she had the particular quality of attention that separates adequate nurses from exceptional ones. She noticed things. She noticed the way a patient's color changed before the monitors did. She noticed when medication schedules shifted by even a single hour. Harriet would have caught this in a heartbeat. Sloan had let Harriet go 8 months ago. She said it was a matter of reducing unnecessary expenses, that I was healthy enough to manage without a full-time nurse. I had accepted that explanation at the time because it sounded reasonable, and because I was still in the habit of finding reasonable explanations for everything my daughter did. I looked at the lab report again. Then I looked at the bottle of pills on the corner of the desk, the one Sloan set out for me every morning and every evening with the efficient care of someone managing a regimen. I picked up the bottle and turned it in my hand. The label read exactly what it was supposed to read. The pills inside looked exactly like what they were supposed to be, but the blood work does not lie. That was something I had told residents for 4 decades. You can argue with a symptom. You can misinterpret an image, but the blood tells you what is happening inside the body with a precision that does not care about your theory or your preference or your hope that you are wrong. I put the bottle back. I made a decision. The next morning, when Sloan set the pill and a glass of water beside my plate, I placed the pill on my tongue and took a sip and thanked her the way I always did. She smiled and turned back to her phone. The moment she left the kitchen, I removed the pill from beneath my tongue and wrapped it in a tissue and put it in my pocket. My hands were steady. I noted that the way I used to note a patient's vitals before a procedure, clinically, without attachment to the observation. 42 years I had prescribed medication to save lives. Now I was hiding medication to save my own. I drove to the post office that afternoon while Sloan was on a call upstairs. I mailed the pill to an independent laboratory in Atlanta that I had used for second opinions during my practice, with a handwritten note requesting a full compound analysis. I did not use email. I did not use my phone. Harriet's termination had taught me something I was only now beginning to articulate. Anyone in my household who could identify what was wrong had been removed. That meant whoever was doing this understood the value of controlling information. I was not going to hand them mine. That evening, after Sloan and Bennett had gone upstairs, I sat in Catherine's study and opened my laptop. I had not checked my medical portal account in weeks. Sloan had been managing my appointments, my prescriptions, my correspondence with Dr. Harmon. She had offered to do it. I had let her. I logged in and went to the access history. What I found made me sit back in the chair and hold very still. Someone had accessed my account at 11:23 on a Tuesday night, 2 weeks earlier, while I had been asleep. And it was not only the medical portal. I checked my email, the same timestamp, the same device. I checked my banking login at Coastal Heritage, the same, 11:23 at night. 3 accounts, 1 device. And the man whose name was on all of them had been unconscious in his bed, while someone else moved through his life like a surgeon moving through tissue. Carefully, precisely, cutting only what they needed to cut. I opened the sent folder of my email account and began reading correspondence I had never written. The first was addressed to Dr. Harmon's office, sent at 11:26 on the same Tuesday night. It requested an increase in the dosage of my anxiety medication, citing persistent episodes of confusion and difficulty sleeping. The language was calm, professional, and structured in the particular way I had written medical correspondence for 4 decades. Whoever composed it had studied how I wrote. They knew my cadence, my sentence structure, the way I opened with context before arriving at the request. The second email was sent 3 minutes later to Coastal Heritage Bank, confirming an appointment to discuss account restructuring and updated beneficiary designations. It carried my name, my signature line, my usual closing. It read exactly the way my correspondence read, which was precisely the point. I sat in Catherine's study at 11:40 at night and looked at those 2 emails and understood something that settled into me like cold water. This was not carelessness. This was craft. Someone had spent enough time reading my words to learn how to become me on a screen. And they had done it at an hour when I was guaranteed to be unconscious. I closed the email and opened my calendar. What I found there was worse. 9 appointments in the past 4 months that I had not scheduled. A follow-up with a neurologist whose name I did not recognize. 2 consultations with a financial advisory firm I had never contacted. A pharmacy pickup for a prescription I had not been informed about. And running alongside all of it, woven through the calendar like sutures through tissue, were notes written in the first person. My voice, my words, except they were not mine. Felt confused this morning. Could not remember where I left my keys. Sloan reminded me about yesterday's conversation, but I had no memory of it. Told Sloan about the episode at the pharmacy. She was concerned. I am grateful she is here. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I went to the calendar settings and checked the edit history. Every one of those entries had been added from a device logged into my account, but not from my laptop, not from my phone. A different device, accessing through the same credentials. I knew what I was looking at. I had spent 42 years writing patient charts with the precision that a court would accept as medical fact. I understood the weight that documentation carries, how it transforms observation into record and record into evidence. What I was reading on my own calendar was not a diary. It was a clinical narrative, assembled entry by careful entry, building the portrait of a man in cognitive decline. It was a patient chart, and I was the patient. I thought about the way Sloan had answered for me at my last physical before I could respond. The way she had started attending every appointment, sitting in the corner with her notebook, asking Dr. Harmon questions while I sat in the examination chair like a man whose opinion about his own body had become secondary to someone else's description of it. I pulled a legal pad from the desk drawer and uncapped a pen. I wrote the date at the top. I wrote, emails 11:23 and 11:26. Not sent by me. I wrote, calendar entries. Device not mine. I wrote, medication. Unverified compound. Lab analysis pending. I wrote, notes of cognitive decline. Fabricated. Then I stopped and looked at what I had written. It looked like the beginning of a case file. It looked like the kind of documentation I would have prepared before a difficult surgery. Systematic, sequential, designed to make the invisible visible. I put the legal pad in the bottom drawer of the desk, beneath the folders from Catherine's estate. The last place anyone would think to look for something new. Then I sat with my hands flat on the surface and let myself feel the weight of what I was beginning to understand. Someone was building a medical case against me. The person building it lived in my house and slept 2 floors above me and called me Dad in a voice that sounded like love when the camera was running. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark and thought about the emails and the calendar and the pills and the particular patience required to construct what was being constructed around me. This was not impulsive. This had been planned the way a procedure is planned, with imaging and preparation and a clear understanding of the desired outcome. The next morning, while Sloane was upstairs on her 9 o'clock call, I went to the kitchen to make coffee. I opened the drawer beside the stove where Catherine had always kept spare batteries and rubber bands and the small things that accumulate in a household over decades. My hand brushed something at the very back, pushed behind a stack of takeout menus, a postcard, creased, slightly bent, as though it had been intercepted and shoved out of sight by someone who did not want it found. On the front was a photograph of the Savannah waterfront at sunset. On the back, in handwriting I recognized immediately, was a small drawing of a pill bottle with a question mark beside it, and beneath it, a single sentence. Not everything prescribed is medicine, Harriet. I held the postcard in both hands and read the sentence twice. Not everything prescribed is medicine. The handwriting was unmistakable. Harriet Dawson wrote the way she did everything else, precisely, without flourish. Each letter formed with the deliberate care of someone who understood that clarity was not optional in her profession. She had drawn a pill bottle in the corner of the card, a simple sketch, the kind a person makes when they need to communicate something important through a channel that cannot carry too many words. Beside the bottle, a question mark, not an accusation, a prompt, the gentlest possible way of saying, "Look closer." I turned the postcard over. The front showed the Savannah waterfront at sunset, the kind of generic image sold at every drugstore and gas station in the city. No return address, no name. She had mailed it the way you mail something when you know the recipient's phone is not private and their email is not their own. Through the oldest, slowest, least monitored channel available. And someone in this house had intercepted it and shoved it behind a stack of takeout menus in a kitchen drawer, which meant someone in this house had known it was coming, or at least had known that mail from certain people needed to disappear. Sloane had fired Harriet 8 months ago. The reason she gave was financial. "We are spending too much on care you do not need," she had said, in the practical tone she used when a decision was already made, and the conversation was a courtesy. Harriet had worked for me for 8 years. She had monitored my vitals, managed my recovery after 2 minor procedures, coordinated with Dr. Harmon on medication adjustments, and kept the kind of detailed records that made every physician who reviewed them comment on their thoroughness. Harriet noticed things. That was the core of who she was professionally. She noticed when a blood pressure reading drifted by 3 points over a week. She noticed when a patient's gait changed by a fraction before the patient noticed it themselves. If the medication Sloane had been giving me was not what the label claimed, Harriet would have seen the effects in my behavior, in my coordination, in the specific ways that sedatives alter the rhythm of a person's daily functioning. She would have seen it. And that, I understood now, was exactly why she had been removed. I put the postcard in the bottom drawer with the legal pad, beneath Catherine's estate folders. Then I locked the drawer and put the key in my jacket pocket and sat for a moment with my hands on the desk, feeling the particular weight of things assembling themselves into a shape I could no longer explain away. That afternoon, while Sloane was at the grocery store, I opened my laptop and searched my cloud drive. I had given Sloane access months ago so she could manage my appointments and share documents with Dr. Harmon's office. I had not thought to check what else might be stored there. I found it in a shared folder labeled Dad Medical Notes, a Word document, 63 pages. The title was Care Observations, Daily Log. I opened it and began to read. October 3rd. Father appeared disoriented upon waking. Required assistance locating bathroom. October 5th. Father could not recall previous day's conversation regarding medication schedule. Became agitated when reminded. October 9th. Father expressed suspicion about financial matters without apparent cause. Mood elevated and erratic. The entries were dated daily, stretching back 12 months. The language was consistent throughout. Always father. Never he. Always passive construction. Always measured. Always just clinical enough to sound credible, and just alarming enough to matter. I recognized the format. It was the format of a contemporaneous medical log, the kind that courts accept as primary evidence in guardianship proceedings, because it carries the presumption of having been written in real time by a concerned observer. I went to the revision history. The document had been created on a single evening 5 months ago. First edit, 8:17 in the evening. Last edit, 12:29 in the morning. In between, 187 individual revisions, 4 hours and 12 minutes. 12 months of daily observations, composed in a single sitting. This was not a journal. This was a fabricated medical record, and the patient it described was a man who did not exist. I scrolled to the final entry. Father's cognitive decline is accelerating. Episodes of confusion are increasing in frequency and severity. Formal evaluation for guardianship is strongly recommended. I closed the laptop. From outside, I heard Sloane's car pull into the driveway. I stood and moved toward the hallway, and on the stairs. Passing her bedroom door, I stopped. The door was slightly open. From inside, I heard her voice, not on the phone. There was no second voice responding through a speaker, no tinny quality of a call in progress. She was speaking to someone who was not there, in a tone that was even rehearsed and perfectly controlled. My father is no longer capable of making his own medical decisions. I stood absolutely still on the landing and listened to my daughter practice the words that were meant to take my life from me. I did not sleep that night. I lay in Catherine's bed with the quilt pulled to my chest and listened to the house breathe. Down the hall, behind a door that used to stay open when Sloane was 9, I could hear her voice low, measured, deliberate, running through sentences the way a resident runs through a presentation before morning rounds. She was rehearsing again. At 6:14, I heard the bedroom door click open. Footsteps crossed the hallway. Water ran in the kitchen. A cabinet opened and closed. Then the familiar sound of a pill rattling inside a plastic bottle. I closed my eyes and waited. She knocked twice. Soft. Almost loving. Morning. Dad. Time for your medication. I took the pill from her palm, placed it on my tongue, and swallowed the glass of water she handed me. She watched my throat move. I had practiced the gesture 17 times in front of the bathroom mirror. The pill sat dry beneath my tongue until she turned away. And then I pressed it into the tissue in my robe pocket. I have errands today, she said from the doorway. Bennett will check on you around noon. The front door closed at 7:41. I counted to 200 before I moved. I walked past the kitchen, past Catherine's orchids on the windowsill, past the photograph of our wedding day on the mantel, and stopped in front of the hallway mirror. I looked at the man staring back at me. 71 years old. Thinning hair the color of November rain. Lines carved by 42 years of standing over open chests. Holding hearts in my hands. Deciding in fractions of a second whether a valve could be saved or had to be replaced. I had made 10,000 decisions inside operating rooms. I had never once hesitated. But standing in that hallway, knowing what my daughter was building around me, I felt something I had not felt since Catherine's oncologist called me into the corridor and shook his head. I felt afraid, not of dying. I had watched death too many times to fear it. I was afraid of the possibility that the girl who once drew hearts on my lunch bag had become someone capable of this. I was afraid of what that said about me as a father. I dressed slowly. Gray trousers, white shirt, the navy blazer Catherine bought me the Christmas before she got sick. I took my car keys from the hook by the garage, the hook Sloan did not know I still used, and backed the sedan out onto Whitaker Street. Ardsley Park is 11 minutes from my house on a Tuesday morning. I had made the drive 600 times across 30 years of friendship. The live oaks formed a canopy over the road, and the Spanish moss hung like curtains in a theater that had been closed for the season. I parked in front of a brick colonial with black shutters and a flagstone path lined with azaleas that had not been trimmed since March. Thomas Beckett answered the door before I knocked. 74 years old. Retired circuit court judge, hands steady as a surgical clamp. He looked at my face, looked at the blazer, and stepped aside without a word. We sat in his study. Leather chairs, walnut bookshelves, a framed photograph of him and Catherine at a fundraiser in 1998. Both of them laughing at something I had said, and neither of them would ever tell me what it was. He poured 2 bourbons and set one in front of me. I had not touched alcohol in 14 months. "You look like a man about to present a case," he said. "I am." I told him everything. The lab results, the hidden pills, the 1123 access logs, the fake emails, the fabricated calendar, the 63-page medical journal written in a single night, the rehearsed line about my incapacity. I laid each fact on his desk, the way I used to lay instruments on a surgical tray, in order. Sterile. Ready. Thomas did not interrupt. He did not raise an eyebrow. He did not reach for his bourbon until I had finished. When I was done, he opened the top drawer of his desk and removed a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, heavy linen paper. My name written across the front in handwriting I would have recognized from the other side of a crowded room. Catherine's handwriting. She came to me 3 times in the last year of her life. Thomas said, the first time, she brought documents. The second time, she brought revisions to her will. The third time, he paused. His hand rested on the envelope. The third time, she brought a recording. And she made me promise that if you ever sat in that chair and said the words you just said, I would give you this. I stared at the envelope. My wife had been dead for 14 months, and she was still diagnosing problems before the rest of us could see the symptoms. Thomas pushed the bourbon closer to me. "Drink first," he said. "Then we open it." I did not drink the bourbon. I held the glass and let the warmth of it settle into my palm while Thomas spoke. "The first time Catherine came," he said, "was in February, 11 months before she passed. She sat where you are sitting now and told me she had found something on Sloane's laptop. Bank statements, transfer authorizations, a draft of a letter addressed to the Chatham County Probate Court requesting an emergency competency evaluation for you. He let the sentence land the way a judge lets a verdict land. No softness, no apology, just the weight of it. Catherine was not a lawyer, he continued, but she was married to a surgeon for 39 years. She understood evidence. She understood timelines. And she understood that the woman building a case against you was the same woman she had carried for 9 months and nursed through scarlet fever at age 4. I set the glass down. The condensation left a circle on the walnut desk, and I stared at it because staring at Thomas would have meant accepting that my wife had known everything and had carried that knowledge in silence while cancer moved through her body like a second betrayal. The second time was in May, Thomas said. She brought revised documents, a new version of her will with a clause she called the protection provision. If anyone sought guardianship over you without independent verification from 2 board-certified physicians and 1 forensic accountant, the entire estate would bypass the petitioner and transfer into a charitable medical trust. She named 3 trustees myself, Gordon Price at the firm, and a physician she trusted completely, who Dr. Nora Castellano, cardiothoracic, Emory. Catherine met her at a fundraiser in 2017 and stayed in contact. She told me Castellano was the only doctor she had ever met who reminded her of you. I closed my eyes. Catherine had built a fortress around me, brick by brick, while I was too busy mourning the future to notice the architecture of her love. The third time was in August, Thomas said. His voice dropped half a register. 3 weeks before she entered hospice, she came alone. She brought a USB drive and asked me to lock it in my safe. She said the drive contained a video recorded in your living room while you were at a cardiology conference in Atlanta. She sat in your reading chair, looked into the camera, and spoke for 11 minutes and 42 seconds. You watched it. Once. The night she died. She had written instructions on the envelope. Play it once to verify the file. Then seal it and wait. Wait for what? Thomas picked up the envelope and held it between us like a scale balancing 2 futures. Wait for the day her husband sat in this chair and told me their daughter was trying to take his life from him. Those were her exact words. The room was quiet. Somewhere outside, a mockingbird sang 3 notes and stopped, as if it too were waiting for what came next. Thomas set the envelope down and opened a leather folder beside it. Inside were 3 pages, each bearing a name, a phone number, and a set of instructions written in Catherine's careful hand. She called it the 3-track protocol, he said. Track 1 medical. Dr. Nora Castellano will perform a full independent evaluation, cognitive, neurological, toxicological. Her report alone can dismantle any competency claim. He turned to the 2nd page. Track 2 digital forensics. Miles Tran. He runs a private cybersecurity firm in Charleston. Catherine found him through a colleague at the university. He will pull every login timestamp, every device signature, every edited file from your accounts, and produce a chain of custody report admissible in any courtroom in Georgia. The 3rd page. Track 3 financial. Gordon Price, forensic accountant. He has already been retained under a sealed engagement letter Catherine signed before her death. His job is to trace every dollar that has moved out of your accounts since the day Sloan returned to Savannah. 3 tracks: medical, digital, financial. My wife had designed a diagnostic protocol for my survival, the way I had designed protocols for patients whose hearts were failing systematic, redundant, impossible to defeat if executed correctly. There was one condition, Thomas said. He closed the folder and looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. From this moment forward, you do not confront Sloan. You do not change your routine. You do not stop taking the pills she gives you, or rather, you do not stop pretending to take them. You remain the patient. You let them believe the diagnosis is working. He pushed the envelope across the desk. Catherine's word, not mine. The best surgeon does not warn the tumor he is coming. I picked up the envelope. It weighed almost nothing. It weighed everything. How long? I asked. 12 days. Castellano can be in Savannah by Friday. Tron needs 72 hours for the digital sweep. Price has been building the financial file for 8 months. He is nearly finished. 12 days. 1,038 heartbeats per hour. I had counted heartbeats for 42 years. I could count 12 more days. 9 days into the countdown. The house tried to kill me. I say the house because it is easier than saying my daughter. It is easier than saying the woman who once fell asleep on my chest during a thunderstorm and whispered, "Don't let go, Daddy." Now wanted me on the floor. It was 2:17 in the morning. I know the exact time because the clock on the bathroom wall, the one Catherine insisted on hanging, because she said a surgeon should never lose track of time. Even in retirement, read, 2:17 when my left foot hit the wet tile and my body went sideways. I reached for the towel bar. It came off the wall. Not broke, came off. Clean. As if the screws had been loosened from the inside. My shoulder struck the edge of the bathtub first. Then my head hit the tile floor, and the world turned into a sound I recognized from 42 years of operating rooms. The flat, dense thud of skull meeting a surface harder than bone. Blood. Warm. Running from my temple down the side of my face and pooling against the grout line where Catherine once knelt to scrub mildew every Sunday morning. I called out, "Sloan." My voice echoed off the tile and came back to me empty. "Sloan, nothing." I reached for my phone on the vanity. My finger slipped twice before I pulled it down. I dialed her number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Her recorded voice bright, rehearsed. The voice she used for the outside world said, "Hi, you've reached Sloan. Leave a message and I'll get right back to you." I did not leave a message. I lay on the tile and listened. Above me, through the ceiling, I could hear her, not moving, not rushing to the stairs, laughing, low and steady, the kind of laugh that lives in the throat and never reaches the mouth, the laugh of someone who has been waiting for a sound and has finally heard it. The phone screen read 2:21. 4 minutes since the fall. She was 14 steps from the bathroom. I had counted them 1,000 times. 14 steps from her bedroom door to the bottom of the stairs. 7 more across the hallway. 3 to the bathroom threshold. 24 steps. 8 seconds at a normal pace. She did not come. I pressed the tissue from my robe pocket, the one that still held this morning's hidden pill, against my temple, and applied pressure the way I had taught 1,000 interns. Direct, firm, patient. The bleeding slowed after 6 minutes. The throbbing did not. I lay there for 4 hours. 4 hours on cold tile with blood drying on my skin and the ceiling fan turning above me in lazy circles. Counting seconds, I refused to count. I thought about Catherine. I thought about the envelope sitting in Thomas Beckett's safe. I thought about Dr. Castellano arriving Friday, and Miles Tran's 72-hour digital sweep already underway, and Gordon Price quietly following the money through accounts my daughter believed no one was watching. I thought about 12 days. 3 had already passed. 9 remained. I thought about the towel bar. I had installed it myself 19 years ago, with 3-inch stainless steel screws anchored into wall studs. Those screws did not loosen on their own. Someone had turned them, carefully, a quarter rotation at a time, until they held just enough weight to feel secure, but not enough to save a 71-year-old man reaching in the dark. A surgeon recognizes premeditation. We see it in the way disease moves not randomly, but along pathways, following blood supply, exploiting weakness. This fall was not an accident. It was a procedure. And my daughter had performed it with the patience of someone who understood that the most effective harm looks like negligence. At 6:08 in the morning, my phone rang. Not Sloan, Harriet. Dr. Mercer. Her voice was the same voice that had stood beside me for 8 years, reading vitals, handing instruments, never flinching. I know what time it is, and I know you are on the floor. I have been calling every morning at this hour since the day she fired me, waiting for the morning you did not answer on the first ring. I answered on the 4th ring. My hand was shaking. Harriet, stay where you are. I am 20 minutes away. Do not let her know I am coming. The line went dead. I set the phone on my chest and stared at the ceiling fan and counted the blades as they turned. 3 blades, like 3 tracks. Medical, digital, financial. 20 minutes. I had waited 4 hours. 20 more was nothing. But when I heard Harriet's car pull into the driveway at 6:29, I did something I had not done since the night Catherine died. I wept. Harriet did not knock. She used the spare key Catherine had given her 6 years ago, the one hidden inside the ceramic frog by the garden gate, the one Sloan never knew existed because Catherine never trusted her with small things. And now I understood why. The bathroom door opened, and Harriet stood there in a gray cardigan and white tennis shoes, a leather medical bag in her left hand. The same bag she had carried for 8 years through this house. She looked at me on the floor. She looked at the blood on the tile. She looked at the towel bar hanging from the wall by a single screw. She did not gasp. She did not cry. She knelt beside me the way she had knelt beside 1,000 patients, one knee down, back straight, hands already moving. How long? She asked. 4 hours and 12 minutes. She opened the medical bag and pulled out gauze, antiseptic, a pen light. She tilted my head gently and examined the wound above my temple. Her fingers were cool and precise. I had forgotten what competence felt like when it came from someone who was not trying to destroy me. Superficial laceration, no skull depression, pupils equal and reactive. She said it the way she always said it, clinical, calm, reporting to the surgeon as if the surgeon were not the patient. You don't need stitches. You need to stop bleeding on this floor. She helped me sit up. The room tilted once and settled. She pressed a folded gauze pad against my temple and placed my hand over it. Hold this. Firm. You taught me that. I remember. She looked at the towel bar again. She walked to it, crouched, and examined the screws. She did not touch them. She pulled her phone from her cardigan pocket and took 4 photographs: the bar, the exposed anchors, the tile beneath it, the wall studs visible through the holes. The eyes were backed out, she said. A quarter turn at a time, maybe an eighth, enough to hold under light pressure but fail under weight. I know. How long has she been doing this? I don't know. Long enough to practice. Harriet sat on the edge of the bathtub and looked at me with an expression I had only seen once before the night we lost a 9-year-old boy on the table, and she stood in the scrub room afterward, holding a pair of surgical gloves she had already removed, staring at the wall as if the wall owed her an explanation. Dr. Mercer, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it as a physician, not as a father. Go ahead. The pills she has been giving you contain a low-dose benzodiazepine compound, not enough to sedate you fully, not enough to trigger an obvious overdose, just enough to create chronic symptoms, mild confusion, unsteady gait, impaired short-term memory, occasional dizziness. Over weeks, the pattern mimics early-stage cognitive decline. Over months, it becomes a medical record. She paused. I noticed it 7 months ago. The way you moved, the way you hesitated at doorways. I ran your vitals 3 times in 1 week, and the numbers did not match the man I knew. I told Sloan I wanted to order an independent blood panel. She fired me the next morning. The house was still. Somewhere above us, a floorboard creaked. 1 creak. Then silence. Harriet lowered her voice. She is awake. I looked at the ceiling. The creak had come from directly above the bathroom Sloane's bedroom. She was standing at the spot where the floor was thinnest, the spot where sound traveled downward, like water through a crack. She was listening. We need to move, Harriet whispered. She helped me to my feet. We walked to Catherine's study and she closed the door. The lock turned with a sound that felt like the closing of a valve, small, mechanical, necessary. Harriet pulled a folded paper from her bag, a printed lab report from a clinic in Decatur. My name. My blood sample, the one I had mailed to Atlanta 5 days ago. Lorazepam, 0.4 milligrams per milliliter. Consistent with daily oral administration over an extended period. She set the report on Catherine's desk beside the legal pad, the postcard, and the locked drawer that held everything else. This is not caregiving, Dr. Mercer. This is poisoning. I picked up the report. The numbers were clean, definitive, inarguable. A surgeon lives for numbers like these numbers that remove doubt and replace it with direction. From above. Another creak. Closer to the stairs now. Harriet looked at me. She is coming down. I folded the report and placed it inside the locked drawer with everything else. I closed the drawer. I turned the key. I put the key in my robe pocket beside the tissue that still held this morning's pill. Then I sat in Catherine's reading chair, placed my hands on the armrests, and waited for my daughter to walk through the door wearing the face she had built for the world. The surgeon does not warn the tumor he is coming. Sloane appeared in the doorway of Catherine's study at 6:41. She wore a white cotton robe and bare feet, and her face carried the expression I had seen her rehearse in the mirror: soft brow, slightly parted lips, a tremor in the chin that looked like concern, but moved like choreography. She looked at Harriet, then at me, then at the gauze on my temple. Oh my God, what happened? Her voice cracked on the word God. A clean crack. Practiced. The kind of break an actress learns to place exactly where sympathy lives. I fell in the bathroom, I said. Harriet was in the neighborhood. She stopped by. Sloane's eyes moved to Harriet and stayed there 3 seconds too long. I have watched thousands of faces in pre-operative consultations. Fear has a rhythm. Surprise has a rhythm. Calculation has a different rhythm entirely. And Sloane's eyes were calculating, measuring how much Harriet had seen, how much I had said, how much of the architecture was still intact. Harriet, Sloane said. The name came out flat. No warmth, no hostility, a controlled neutral, the way you address someone whose presence changes the variables in an equation you had already solved. Sloane. Harriet's voice matched hers. 2 women standing on opposite sides of a patient, each knowing what the other knew, neither willing to say it first. I didn't realize you were still in Savannah, Sloane said. I never left. The room held its breath. I sat in Catherine's chair with my hands on the armrests, and my heart beat. At 72 I counted, because counting is what I do when the world becomes a thing that requires measurement instead of trust. Sloane crossed the room and knelt beside my chair. She touched the gauze on my temple with fingertips that were gentle and deliberate and absolutely empty. We should call Dr. Fenton, she said. You might have a concussion. Harriet already checked. Pupils equal and reactive. No signs of concussion. Harriet is not your doctor. Harriet was my nurse for 8 years. She is qualified to assess a superficial laceration. Sloane's jaw tightened. A micro-expression. Half a second. Gone. But I caught it the way I used to catch an irregular heartbeat on a monitor, not because I was looking for it, but because 42 years had trained my eyes to see what people try to hide. She stood, smoothed her robe, and turned to Harriet. Thank you for helping him. I can take it from here. I'm sure you can, Harriet said. Sloane left the room. Her footsteps crossed the hallway 14 steps to the stairs, measured, and and climbed to the 2nd floor. A door closed. Then silence. Harriet waited 30 seconds. She pulled her chair closer to mine and spoke in a voice so low I had to lean forward to hear it. She knows I've seen the wound. She knows I've been inside the house. From this moment, she will accelerate. Whatever timeline she had planned, she will compress it. How long do we have? Before today, I would have said 3 weeks. Now, 10 days. Maybe less. I thought of Thomas Beckett's countdown. 12 days, he had said. 3 had passed. 9 remained. Harriet was giving me 10. The margin was 1 day. In cardiac surgery, 1 day is the difference between a valve replacement and a funeral. Tell me everything, I said. Everything you did not say while she was in the room. Harriet folded her hands in her lap. The gesture was familiar. She always folded her hands before delivering a difficult prognosis. The way a chaplain folds hands before prayer. 7 months ago, I began documenting. Not on any device connected to this house. I used a notebook, handwritten, kept in a safe deposit box at First Chatham Bank on Drayton Street. She paused. 31 entries, dates, times, pill descriptions, your vital signs, behavioral observations, and my professional assessment of each. 31 entries. 7 months. She had been building a case in silence while I was building a life I did not realize was a prison. I also contacted someone, she said, a woman named Dr. Nora Castellano, cardiothoracic specialist at Emory. My chest tightened. Catherine's physician, the same name Thomas had given me 2 days ago. Castellano already has my notebook copies. She has your mailed blood sample results. And she has agreed to perform a full independent evaluation, cognitive, neurological, and toxicological this Friday. Friday. 6 days from now. Track 1 was already in motion before I knew there were tracks. Harriet, I said, how did you know about Castellano? She looked at the reading chair I was sitting in. Catherine's chair. The chair where my wife had recorded an 11-minute video to a camera I never saw, because Catherine told me. Harriet said, 2 weeks before she died. She called me to this room, sat me in that chair, and said, when the time comes, you will know what to do, and you will not be alone. The ceiling fan turned above us. 3 blades, 3 tracks. And now I understood that Catherine had not built 2 safety nets. She had built 3. The next 6 days moved like blood through a narrowing artery steady on the surface, dangerous underneath. I performed. That is the only word for it. Every morning I sat at the kitchen table and let Sloane place a pill on my palm. Every morning I swallowed water and held the pill beneath my tongue and waited for her to turn away. Every morning I wrapped the pill in tissue and locked it in the drawer with everything else. The collection grew. 6 pills in 6 days. Lined up inside a plastic bag like specimens in a pathology lab. Sloane performed too. She cooked breakfast with the camera running. She asked about my sleep with the camera running. She touched my shoulder and called me Daddy with the camera running. When the camera was off, she made phone calls in the upstairs hallway with the door closed, and her voice dropped to a frequency I could feel in the floorboards, but could not decode. Bennett came to the house every afternoon at 12:15. Punctual. Consistent. He brought groceries. He checked the thermostat. He sat in the living room and watched television with the volume at 14. Always 14. Never 13. Never 15. And he left at 3:30 without saying more than 40 words. I watched him the way I used to watch a patient's rhythm strip before surgery, not for what it showed, but for what it tried to hide. On the 4th day, I found it. Bennett was standing in the kitchen, unloading a paper bag of groceries onto the counter. Sloane was upstairs. I sat at the table with a cup of coffee I had not touched and a newspaper I had not read. He placed a carton of eggs on the counter, a loaf of bread, a bottle of orange juice, and then his hand went to the bottom of the bag and stopped. He did not pull out the last item. He looked toward the stairs. He listened. Then he reached into the bag and placed a small amber prescription bottle beside the orange juice. The label faced away from me. He turned it so the label faced the wall, then slid it behind the bread, where it would not be visible from the table. His hand was shaking, not the tremor of a man with a neurological condition, not the shake of age or fatigue, the shake of a man who knows what he is carrying and does not want to carry it. I had seen that shake 10,000 times in the hands of family members signing consent forms they did not fully understand, agreeing to procedures they could not stop, participating in outcomes they did not choose. Bennett was not the architect. Bennett was the instrument. He turned and saw me watching him. Our eyes met for 1.4 seconds. In surgery, 1.4 seconds is enough to identify a bleed, locate its source, and decide whether to clamp or cauterize. In that kitchen, 1.4 seconds was enough to see everything Bennett Hale could not say. His lips parted, closed. His jaw moved left, then right, a bruxism response, involuntary, stress-induced. His eyes dropped to the table and stayed there. Need anything else? Sir, no. Bennett, thank you. He left at 3:30. I waited until his car turned the corner on Whitaker Street. Then I walked to the counter, moved the bread, and picked up the amber bottle. The label read, lorazepam, 0.5 milligrams, prescribed to Franklin Mercer by Dr. Richard Fenton. 30 tablets. Refill 2 of 4. Dr. Fenton, the physician I had never visited, the prescription I had never authorized, the refill that meant this had been happening for at least 3 months. Cycling through a system designed to look routine, I photographed the bottle front, back, lot number, pharmacy address. I placed it exactly where Bennett had left it, angled the bread to the same position, and returned to my chair. That evening, I called Thomas Beckett from Catherine's study with the door locked. Bennett brought the pills, I said. Lorazepam, prescribed under Fenton's name. Refill 2 of 4. Thomas was quiet for 3 seconds. I could hear him writing. Gordon Price pulled Bennett's financial records yesterday, he said. 14 deposits over 11 months. All cash. All under $9,000, just below the federal reporting threshold. Total $86,400. $86,000. The price of a son-in-law's silence. The price of a man's hands shaking over a paper bag in a kitchen that used to smell like Catherine's lemon cake. And Tran, I asked. 72-hour sweep finished this morning. Every login, every edit, every device signature. He is building the report now. Castellano, Friday. 2 days. She will arrive at my house at 9 in the morning. I will bring you to her. 2 days. 2 tracks complete. 1 remaining. The narrowing artery was almost closed. I hung up the phone and sat in Catherine's chair and looked at the garden through the window. The roses she planted the year Sloane was born had grown wild without her hands to guide them. Some things, once untended, become unrecognizable. Friday morning arrived the way a scalpel arrives at the skin, quiet, precise, inevitable. I told Sloane I was going for a walk. She looked up from her phone, measured me with a glance that lasted exactly 2 seconds, and nodded. She did not offer to come. She did not ask where. She had learned in 14 months that old men go for walks, and walks do not threaten timelines. Thomas Beckett was waiting at the end of Whitaker Street in a black sedan with the engine running. I got in without a word. We drove 11 minutes to Ardsley Park, and neither of us spoke because there was nothing left to say that the next 2 hours would not say for us. Dr. Nora Castellano was standing in Thomas's study when we arrived. She was 53 years old, tall, with short silver hair and hands that moved the way surgeons' hands move, economical, deliberate, never wasted. She wore no jewelry, no watch. A cardiothoracic specialist at Emory does not need accessories to announce authority. She looked at me, and I looked at her, and something passed between us that only two people who have held a human heart in their palms can understand. Recognition. Not of the face, of the discipline. "Dr. Mercer," she said, "Catherine told me you would sit in that chair one day. I hoped she was wrong." "She was never wrong," I said. "That was the problem and the gift." Castellano opened a steel briefcase on Thomas's desk. Inside were 3 folders: a portable blood draw kit, a digital cognitive assessment tablet, and a voice recorder. "I will conduct 3 evaluations," she said. "First, a full cognitive panel, Montreal cognitive assessment, clock drawing, verbal fluency, delayed recall. Second, a neurological screen reflexes, gait analysis, coordination, pupillary response. Third, a toxicological blood draw processed at my private lab at Emory. Chain of custody maintained from vein to report." She paused and looked at me the way I used to look at patients before I opened their chests. "The cognitive and neurological exams will prove you are not impaired. The toxicology will prove why someone wanted you to appear as if you were." We began. The Montreal cognitive assessment took 14 minutes. I scored 30 out of 30. Castellano noted the score without expression, but her pen stopped for half a second on the paper, the pause of a physician who expected competence and received confirmation. The clock drawing was flawless. The verbal fluency produced 23 words in 60 seconds, above the 95th percentile for my age. Delayed recall, 5 out of 5 items after 10 minutes. "Your cognitive function is fully intact," she said, "consistent with a man of superior intellect and no neurological impairment." The neurological screen took 11 minutes. Reflexes symmetric. Gait steady. I had been off the pills for 9 days, and my body had already begun clearing the lorazepam. Coordination normal. Pupils equal and reactive at 3 millimeters. "No neurological deficits," she said. "None." Then the blood draw. She tied the tourniquet above my left elbow, found the median cubital vein on the first attempt, and filled 3 tubes: lavender, red, and gray. She labeled each with my name, date of birth, the date, and her initials. She sealed them in a biohazard bag and placed them in a temperature-controlled case. "Results in 48 hours, she said. "But based on Harriet's independent lab report and the prescription bottle you photographed, I can already tell you what we will find. Lorazepam. Lorazepam. Chronic low-dose administration. Consistent with the hepatic enzyme elevation in your original blood work and the cholinergic suppression Harriet documented. Someone has been giving you just enough sedative to create symptoms of cognitive decline without triggering an acute overdose." She closed the steel briefcase. "In my professional opinion, which I will certify under oath, you are a cognitively intact, neurologically sound, 71-year-old man who has been subjected to covert pharmaceutical manipulation designed to simulate dementia-like symptoms for the purpose of establishing grounds for guardianship." The words landed in the room like a verdict. Thomas wrote them down. The voice recorder captured them, and I sat in that chair and felt something I had not felt in 14 months. Certainty, not the certainty of anger, not the certainty of revenge. The certainty of a surgeon who has opened the chest, identified the lesion, and knows exactly where to place the clamp. The certainty that comes after the shaking stops and the hands go still, and the only thing left is the procedure itself. Castellano extended her hand. I shook it. Her grip was firm and brief. "Catherine chose well," she said, "both in her physician and in her husband. She left through the back door. Thomas locked the briefcase in his safe beside the USB drive and the cream-colored envelope I had not yet opened. 3 tracks. Medical complete. Digital complete. Financial complete. The diagnosis was finished. All that remained was the surgery. Thomas poured 2 bourbons. This time, I drank mine. When I asked, "Tuesday," he said, "Your birthday." Saturday morning, Thomas Beckett's study. The bourbon glasses from the night before still sat on the desk, and the room smelled like old leather and decisions that could not be undone. Miles Tran arrived at 9:15. He was 41, Vietnamese-American, compact, with wire-rimmed glasses and a messenger bag that looked like it had been through airport security in 30 countries. He ran a private cybersecurity firm in Charleston, the kind of firm that does not advertise, because every client it has ever served was referred by someone who could not afford to be wrong. Catherine had found him. Of course she had. He sat across from me and opened a laptop. No small talk. No condolences. He typed a 6-digit passcode, turned the screen toward me, and said, "This is your digital life for the past 14 months. Dr. Mercer. Or rather, this is what someone made your digital life look like." The screen displayed a timeline. Each entry was color-coded blue for email, green for medical portal, red for banking, yellow for cloud storage. Every access point was tagged with a device signature, an IP address, and a timestamp. 2 devices, Tran said. Your laptop, a MacBook, registered to your home network. Device signature, ending in 7F3. And a second device, an iPad registered to a mobile hotspot. Signature ending in 9A1. The iPad was never connected to your home Wi-Fi. It accessed your accounts exclusively through cellular data, which means whoever used it did not want the activity to appear on your network logs. He scrolled down. The iPad made its first access on January 14th, 11 days after your daughter moved into the house. Since that date, it has logged into your medical portal 83 times, your email 112 times, and your Coastal Heritage bank account 61 times. Every login occurred between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. Every single one. I stared at the screen. The blue and green and red lines ran parallel like vessels on an angiogram, each one carrying something vital in a direction it was never meant to go. The emails, Tran continued. 14 sent messages that do not match your typing pattern. I ran a stylometric analysis, keystroke cadence, word frequency, sentence structure. The match probability to your known writing is 11%. The match probability to a second author is 94%. Can you identify the second author? Not from keystrokes alone. But the iPad's device signature is registered to a Best Buy purchase made on January 7th. The receipt was paid with a Visa card ending in 4417. He closed the laptop. The card belongs to Bennett Hale. Bennett. The instrument. The man whose hands shook over a paper bag. The man who had been paid $86,400 in cash deposits below the federal reporting line. He had bought the device. Sloan had used it. The architecture was clear. Tran handed me a sealed flash drive. Full report, 412 pages. Device logs, timestamps, stylometric analysis, IP traces, purchase records, chain of custody documented, admissible in any court in the state of Georgia. He shook my hand, placed a business card on the desk, and left through the back door the same way Castellano had. People who work in the spaces between truth and concealment know how to enter and exit a room without leaving a trace. Gordon Price arrived at 10:45. He was 62, bald, with reading glasses on a chain around his neck and a leather portfolio that he placed on the desk with the precision of a man who understands that numbers are not abstractions. They are confessions. I have been retained under a sealed engagement letter your wife signed 22 months ago, he said. She gave me access to every financial account in the Mercer estate and asked me to monitor for irregular activity. I have been doing so since her death. He opened the portfolio. Total unauthorized transfers from your accounts over the past 11 months, $247,000. Distributed across 14 wire transfers to 3 separate accounts, one in Sloane's name, one in Bennett's name, and one in the name of a limited liability company registered in Delaware 6 days before Sloane moved into your house. He turned the page. The LLC is called Whitaker Property Holdings. Its registered agent is Bennett Hale. Its sole member, through a series of shell documents, is Sloane Mercer Hale. The LLC has made a deposit on a commercial property in downtown Savannah, a former medical office building, valued at $1.2 million. The deposit was $400,000. $247,000 came from your accounts. The remaining $153,000 came from the cash deposits Bennett received. I looked at the numbers. Clean, precise, inarguable. $247,000 stripped from accounts Catherine and I had built over 42 years of saving, investing, and living within means that a surgeon's income afforded, but a surgeon's humility never took for granted. Price closed the portfolio. Your wife told me something the last time I saw her. She said, "Gordon, follow the money. It will tell you who my daughter has become." I closed my eyes. Catherine had known. Even then, even dying, the money had spoken, and what it said was something no father should ever have to hear. Sunday evening, the day before, I sat in the living room and watched Bennett Hale fall apart in real time. He arrived at 12:15 as always. Groceries, thermostat, television at volume 14. But today his routine had fractures in it, hairline cracks that only a man trained to read vital signs would notice. He placed the grocery bag on the counter and missed the edge. An apple rolled across the tile and stopped against the baseboard. He stared at it for 4 seconds before picking it up. 4 seconds. In an operating room. 4 seconds of hesitation means the surgeon has seen something unexpected inside the chest. In a kitchen, it means the man holding the apple has seen something unexpected inside himself. He did not bring a prescription bottle today. His hand searched the bottom of the bag the way they always did muscle memory, the body rehearsing a task the mind has already abandoned. When his fingers found nothing, he exhaled. The exhale was 3 beats too long. Relief. Someone had not given him a bottle to deliver. Or someone had. And he had left it in the car. Either way, the supply chain had a crack in it. And cracks in supply chains mean the system is under stress. I watched him sit on the couch. He picked up the remote, turned on the television. Volume 14. A news anchor talked about a storm system moving up the coast. Bennett stared at the screen, but his eyes were not tracking the images. They were fixed on a point approximately 6 inches behind the glass, the distance at which a person stares when they are looking at nothing because everything they see is inside their own head. At 1:47, his phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, read the screen, and his face changed. Not dramatically. Not the way faces change in films. The way a cardiac rhythm changes when a ventricle misfires a subtle deviation that looks normal to anyone who is not holding the monitor. His thumb hovered over the screen for 3 seconds. He did not reply. He placed the phone face down on the cushion beside him and pressed both palms flat against his thighs, a self-stabilizing gesture I had seen in thousands of patients receiving news they had already suspected, but were not ready to confirm. Sloane was upstairs. I could hear the floorboards marking her path, bedroom to bathroom, bathroom to bedroom. The pacing of a general reviewing maps the night before a battle she believed she had already won. "Bennett," I said. He flinched, not visibly, internally. I saw it in the way his shoulders tightened a quarter inch, and his breathing shifted from thoracic to diaphragmatic, the body's involuntary switch from calm to alert. "Yes, sir. How are you doing?" The question landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Simple, ordinary, devastating. Because no one had asked Bennett Hale that question in a very long time. And the human body is not built to withstand kindness when it has been surviving on fear. His jaw moved. The bruxism response again, left, right, left. His eyes found the apple on the counter, then the television, then the carpet, then nothing. "I'm fine, sir." "You don't look fine." He stood up. Too fast. The remote fell from the cushion and hit the floor. He picked it up, placed it on the coffee table, and straightened his shirt, a sequence of corrections that looked like composure but sounded like panic. "I should go," he said. "Sloane needs me to pick up her dry cleaning." It was 1:52. He always left at 3:30. 98 minutes early. The deviation was significant. A man who has maintained the same routine for 11 months does not break it unless something inside him has broken first. He walked to the door. His hand rested on the knob. He did not turn it. "Dr. Mercer." "Yes." His back was to me. His shoulders rose and fell once a single deep breath, the kind a patient takes before asking the question they have been afraid to ask since they sat down in the examination room. If someone did something because they were afraid, and they knew it was wrong, and they couldn't stop it because stopping it meant losing everything, would you? He stopped. The sentence hung in the air unfinished, like a suture tied on one side but not the other. "Would I what? Bennett." He turned the knob, opened the door. The afternoon light poured in and erased his silhouette. "Never mind," he said. "Happy birthday tomorrow." "Sir." The door closed. His car started. The engine sound faded down Whitaker Street until the only thing left was the television at volume 14 and a question that would not stop echoing off the walls. I turned off the television and sat in the silence. Tomorrow was Monday. My 72nd birthday. The day Thomas Beckett would set the table. The day Castellano's toxicology report would arrive. The day Miles Tron's flash drive and Gordon Price's portfolio would open in front of the people who never expected to be read like a chart. I went to Catherine's study. I opened the locked drawer. I looked at everything inside the pills, the legal pad, the postcard, the lab report, the photographs. Then I looked at the envelope. Cream-colored. Catherine's handwriting. Tomorrow I would open it. Monday morning. My 72nd birthday. The house smelled like coffee and something sweet. Sloane had baked a cake at 6 a.m., and the scent drifted through the hallway like a memory pretending to be a kindness. She sang happy birthday while I sat at the kitchen table. The camera was on. Her voice was steady, warm, perfectly pitched. Bennett stood behind her, holding a small wrapped box, his smile fastened to his face like a surgical clip holding tissue that wanted to separate. "Make a wish, Dad," Sloane said. I blew out 2 candles, a 7 and a 2, and wished for something she would never understand. I wished for the woman she used to be, the girl who drew hearts on my lunch bag, the child who believed her father could fix anything. That girl was gone. The woman standing in front of me had replaced her, and the replacement was so precise that most people would never notice the difference. But I was a surgeon. I noticed the difference between living tissue and something that only looked alive. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. The camera turned off. Sloane kissed my forehead, a gesture so mechanical I could feel the choreography in her lips, and told me she had planned a small dinner that evening. Just family. 7 o'clock. "Bennett will set the table," she said. "You rest today. Doctor's orders." She smiled. I smiled back. Two people performing in a theater where both actors knew the script was a lie, but only one knew the final act had been rewritten at 10:15. Sloane left for the salon. Bennett followed in his own car, carrying her dry cleaning and a face that looked like it had not slept since Sunday. The house was empty. I had approximately 3 hours. I went to Catherine's study. I locked the door. I opened the drawer and removed everything: the pills, the legal pad, the postcard, the lab report, the photographs of the prescription bottle, and the cream-colored envelope I had been staring at for 11 days. I held the envelope for a long time. Her handwriting. My name. The ink was blue, the same shade she used for grocery lists, birthday cards, and the letter she wrote me the night before my first solo bypass surgery in 1983. She had written, "Your hands were made for this. Come home to me when it's done." I opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded note and a USB drive. The note read, "Franklin, if you are reading this, then what I feared has happened, and what I prepared for has begun. Do not blame yourself. A surgeon cannot diagnose a disease that has not yet shown symptoms, but a wife can, and a mother can, even when the diagnosis breaks her heart." The drive contains a video. 11 minutes. I recorded it in your reading chair on September 14th, while you were in Atlanta. Watch it alone. Then do what you have always done. Operate with precision, with courage, and with the knowledge that I am standing beside you, even when you cannot see me. I loved you for 39 years. I will love you for whatever comes after that. Catherine. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. The file was labeled, "For Franklin when the time comes." I pressed play. Catherine appeared on the screen. She was sitting in the reading chair, this chair, the one I was sitting in now. She wore the blue cardigan I had bought her for Christmas. Her hair was thinner than I remembered. Her face was pale but composed. The face of a woman who had accepted her own death and was now focused entirely on preventing someone else's. "Hello, my love," she said. "I'm sorry you are seeing this. I am sorry because it means I was right. And being right about your own child is the worst kind of diagnosis." Her voice was steady, clinical, almost. She had learned that from me, the ability to deliver devastating information without letting the delivery destroy the message. She spoke for 11 minutes and 42 seconds. She described what she had found on Sloane's laptop, the bank transfers, the probate petition draft, the research into guardianship law. She explained the protection provision in her revised will. She named the 3 people she had chosen: Castellano, Tran, Price, and explained why she trusted each of them. She described Harriet's role and the notebook and the safe deposit box, and then, at the 9-minute mark, her voice changed. The clinical tone softened. Her eyes glistened. She leaned forward in the chair and spoke directly to the camera, as if she could see me through time. "Franklin, I know what you are thinking. You are thinking you failed her. You are thinking a father should have seen this coming. But listen to me. You did not create this. You loved her with everything you had. Some diseases do not come from the body. They come from choices, and choices belong to the person who makes them. She paused. A tear ran down her left cheek. She did not wipe it. Save yourself. Franklin, that is my last prescription. The screen went black. I sat in her chair and felt her absence fill the room like anesthesia slowly, completely, until I could not move. 11 minutes and 42 seconds. The most important consultation of my life, delivered by the only physician who ever truly knew the patient. I spent the afternoon preparing the way I used to prepare for surgery, methodically, silently, with every instrument accounted for, before the first incision. At 2 o'clock, I called Thomas Beckett from Catherine's study. Tonight, I said, I know. 7 o'clock. Castellano's toxicology report arrived this morning. Lorazepam confirmed. Chronic administration, consistent with Harriet's findings and the independent lab. The report is signed, notarized, and sealed. Tron's flash drive, in my briefcase, 412 pages. Device logs, stylometric analysis, purchase records, chain of custody certified. Price, portfolio complete. $247,000 traced. LLC documentation. Property deposit records. Every dollar mapped from your account to theirs. 3 tracks. 3 reports. 3 sealed envelopes sitting in a leather briefcase 11 minutes from my house. The operating theater was ready. The instruments were laid out. All that remained was the patient on the table. Thomas, I said, I need one more thing. Name it. Detective Ray Salinas, Chatham County. Catherine mentioned him in the video. She said he was the only officer she trusted with something like this. Can you reach him? Already done. He will be at my house at 6:30. I will brief him before we arrive. I closed my eyes. Catherine had thought of everything. She had built the case the way I built surgical plans, with redundancy, with precision, with the understanding that failure was not an option when the patient's life depended on the outcome. One more question, I said. The documents Sloan plans to have me sign tonight, do you know what they are? Gordon intercepted a draft through the probate court clerk's office last week. A petition for emergency guardianship. Medical affidavit from Dr. Richard Fenton, financial power of attorney, and a voluntary consent form designed to look like you are agreeing to let Sloan manage your affairs because of your declining health. Voluntary, that is the word they used. The form requires your signature and the signature of one witness. I suspect Bennett is the intended witness. I thought of Bennett's unfinished sentence at the door. If someone did something because they were afraid, he was afraid. He had been afraid for 11 months, and tonight Sloan would ask him to witness the signature that sealed the cage she had built around me. Let her bring the documents, I said. Let her set the table. Let her believe the dinner is hers. And when she asks you to sign, I will pick up the pen, and then I will put it down. Thomas was quiet for 3 seconds. When he spoke, his voice carried the gravity of a man who had delivered 10,000 verdicts and understood that the heaviest ones were the ones spoken in living rooms. I will be there at 6:55. Back door, Castellano, Tron, and Price will enter through the garden gate, the one with the ceramic frog. Salinas will remain in his vehicle on Whitaker Street until I signal. The ceramic frog, Catherine's spare key. The same entrance Harriet had used the morning she found me on the bathroom floor. My wife had designed the entry point 2 years before the operation would need it. "Harriet," I asked. "She will be with Castellano. She requested to be present." I saw no reason to refuse. "Good. She earned the right." I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of Catherine's study. The garden was visible through the window. The roses had grown wild thorns and blooms tangled together, beauty and pain sharing the same stem. I had not touched them since she died. Tonight, I thought I would begin pruning. At 4 o'clock, I showered. I dressed in the gray trousers, white shirt, and navy blazer, the same clothes I had worn to Thomas's house 11 days ago. Catherine's blazer, the blazer she bought me the Christmas before the diagnosis. I buttoned it slowly, looking at myself in the hallway mirror. 72 years old today. The man in the mirror was thinner than the man who had retired 3 years ago. The lines were deeper. The bruise on my temple had faded to yellow, but the eyes were the same eyes that had looked into 10,000 open chests and decided, in fractions of a second, what lived and what did not. Tonight I would make one more decision. At 5:30, Sloane came downstairs. She wore a black dress and pearl earrings, Catherine's pearls. The ones I had given my wife on our 20th anniversary. She had taken them from the jewelry box in the bedroom without asking. She had put them on the way a thief puts on a crown with the confidence of someone who believes ownership is a matter of possession, not of love. "You look handsome." "Dad," she said. "You look like your mother," I said. It was the truest and cruelest thing I had ever spoken. Bennett arrived at 6:15. He carried a bottle of wine and a manila envelope. The envelope was thick, legal-sized, unsigned. He placed the wine on the counter and the envelope on the dining table beside the place setting where I would sit. The table was set. The candles were lit. The trap was dressed in linen and crystal and the stolen pearls of a dead woman. And somewhere on Whitaker Street, a detective sat in a parked sedan, waiting for a signal. 7 o'clock. The dining room. 3 place settings. Roast chicken, green beans, a birthday cake with white frosting, and the number 72 written in blue, Catherine's favorite color, used by a woman who had stolen Catherine's pearls and saw no contradiction in the gesture. Sloane sat across from me. Bennett sat to my left. The manila envelope rested beside my plate like a prescription waiting to be filled. "Before we eat," Sloane said, "there's something I want to talk about." She folded her hands on the table. The gesture was practiced. I had watched her rehearse it in the mirror, had heard her run the words behind her bedroom door, had counted the hours she had spent constructing this single moment. "Dad, I've been worried about you. The falls, the confusion, the memory lapses." She paused. Her eyes glistened on cue. "I spoke with Dr. Fenton. He agrees that it might be time to consider some additional support. Nothing drastic. Just a way to make sure you're protected." She slid the manila envelope toward me. "It's a simple form. It gives me the ability to help manage your medical decisions and finances. Just until you're feeling stronger." I looked at the envelope. I looked at Bennett. His hands were under the table. I knew they were shaking because the silverware beside his plate was trembling a vibration so faint that only a man who had spent 42 years reading the tremors of the human body would notice. I picked up the envelope. I opened it slowly. 4 documents. The guardianship petition, Fenton's medical affidavit, the financial power of attorney, the voluntary consent form, my name printed on every page, a yellow tab marking the signature line on each. I picked up the pen Sloane had placed beside my glass. "Dad," she said. Her voice cracked again. The same clean crack, the same rehearsed break. "It's just a signature. It doesn't change anything between us." I held the pen over the first signature line. The tip hovered 1 inch above the paper. 1 inch. The distance between a diagnosis and a death sentence. The distance between trust and the end of trust. I put the pen down. "No," I said. The word fell into the room like a clamp closing on a severed artery. Small. Metallic. Final. Sloane's face did not move. Her eyes did not blink. For 1.7 seconds, she was completely still. The stillness of a system recalculating, rerouting, searching for an alternative pathway. "Dad, you don't understand." "I understand everything." The back door opened. Thomas Beckett walked into the dining room wearing a charcoal suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Behind him came Dr. Nora Castellano, Miles Tron, Gordon Price, and Harriet Dawson. They entered single file. Quiet. Precise. The way a surgical team enters an operating theater, each person knowing their position, their instrument, their role. Sloane stood. Her chair scraped against the hardwood. Bennett did not stand. Bennett closed his eyes. "What is this?" Sloane said. Thomas placed the briefcase on the table beside the birthday cake. He opened it and removed 3 sealed envelopes. He laid them in a row, left to right. The order of the 3 tracks Catherine had designed. "Track 1, Thomas said. He opened the first envelope. "Dr. Nora Castellano, full cognitive, neurological, and toxicological evaluation of Franklin Mercer. Montreal Cognitive Assessment, 30 out of 30. Neurological screen, no deficits. Toxicology chronic lorazepam administration confirmed. Professional opinion, your father is cognitively intact and has been subjected to covert pharmaceutical manipulation." Sloane's lips parted. No sound came out. "Track 2. He opened the second envelope. "Miles Tran. Digital forensic analysis. 83 unauthorized medical portal logins. 112 email logins. 61 banking logins. All from an iPad purchased by Bennett Hale on January 7th. Stylometric analysis confirms 14 forged emails, with a 94% match to a second author." Bennett's head dropped. His chin touched his chest. The posture of a man whose skeleton had decided to stop holding him upright. "Track 3. Thomas opened the third envelope. Gordon Price, forensic accounting. $247,000 transferred from Franklin Mercer's accounts across 14 wire transfers to 3 accounts, 1 in your name, 1 in Bennett's name, 1 in the name of Whitaker Property Holdings, a Delaware LLC registered 6 days before you moved into this house. Sole member Sloane Mercer Hale." The room was silent. The candles flickered. The birthday cake sat between the evidence envelopes like an offering on an altar that had been desecrated. Sloane looked at me. For the first time in 14 months, her face was not performing. The mask was gone. Beneath it was something I had never seen in my daughter's eyes. Not guilt, not shame, not remorse. Fear. The raw, animal fear of a predator that has just discovered it was never the one in control. "You knew," she whispered. "I'm a surgeon. Sloane. I diagnose for a living. I reached across the table and removed Catherine's pearl earrings from the space beside her plate, where she had set her napkin. I held them in my palm, small, luminous, warm from the candlelight. "These are not yours," I said. "And neither am I." Thomas nodded toward the front window. Outside, on Whitaker Street, a car door opened. Detective Ray Salinas walked through the front door, the way a surgeon walks into a chest that has already been opened with the calm of a man who knows exactly what he will find because someone else has done the diagnostic work. He was 58. Broad shoulders, gray at the temples, a badge clipped to his belt, and a manila folder in his left hand. He looked at the dining table, the birthday cake, the evidence envelopes, the unsigned guardianship petition, the pearl earrings resting in my palm, and he took in the entire scene in 4 seconds. 4 seconds. The same amount of time Bennett had spent staring at an apple on the kitchen floor. But Salinas wasn't hesitating. He was cataloging. "Dr. Mercer," he said. "Judge Beckett briefed me this afternoon. I have reviewed the summary reports from Dr. Castellano, Mr. Tron, and Mr. Price. I have also spoken with the Chatham County District Attorney's Office." He set the manila folder on the table beside the birthday cake. "Sloan Mercer Hale. Bennett Hale." He looked at each of them the way a physician looks at a scan, reading what is visible, noting what is hidden, calculating what comes next. "You are both under investigation for the following elder financial exploitation under Georgia Code. Section 30-5-8. Forgery and identity fraud under Section 16-9-1 and 16-9-100.21. Unauthorized access to medical records under HIPAA federal statute." And he paused. The pause was deliberate. A detective's pause, not a doctor's. The kind that lets the silence do the work. Aggravated assault, the loosened towel bar in the bathroom, the fall at 2:17 a.m. We recovered the screws this morning. Tool marks on the heads are consistent with a Phillips head screwdriver turned in reverse. Partial fingerprint on the second screw. We are running it now. Sloane's hands gripped the edge of the table. Her knuckles went white. The same hands that had placed pills on my palm every morning for 14 months. The same fingers that had typed 187 edits into a fabricated medical journal in a single night. The same nails that had worn Catherine's pearls as though they had been inherited rather than stolen. "You can't do this," she said. Her voice was thin. The rehearsal was gone. The mirror was broken. What remained was the sound of a woman standing in the wreckage of an architecture she had believed was unbreakable. "He's confused. He doesn't understand what's happening. That's why I filed the Mrs. Hale." Salinas's voice was flat, clinical. He could have been one of my residents presenting rounds. "Your father scored 30 out of 30 on the Montreal Cognitive Assessment administered by a board-certified specialist 2 days ago. His neurological screen showed 0 deficits. His toxicology confirms chronic administration of a sedative he did not prescribe and did not consent to receive. The confusion you are describing does not exist. It was manufactured." Sloane turned to Bennett. Her eyes demanded something support. Silence. Complicity. The same demand she had made every day for 11 months. But Bennett was no longer looking at her. He was looking at me. "I'm sorry," Bennett said. His voice cracked. Not the clean, practiced crack Sloane had perfected. A real crack. the sound of a man whose structure had finally exceeded its load-bearing capacity. "I'm sorry. Dr. Mercer, I didn't," she said. "It was temporary. She said it was just to manage the finances until you were better. I didn't know about the pills. I swear, I didn't know about the pills until..." "Until when?" Bennett, his jaw trembled. The bruxism was gone. What replaced it was something worse. The stillness of a man who has run out of mechanisms to contain what is inside him. Until I found the bottle in her nightstand. 3 months ago. Lorazepam. And a printout from a medical website. How to simulate cognitive decline in elderly patients. He closed his eyes. I should have stopped it. I know I should have stopped it. The room held its breath. Harriet stood by the wall with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Castellano watched with the detachment of a physician observing a procedure she had predicted. Tron and Price stood behind Thomas like witnesses at a bench trial that had no bench. Salinas opened the manila folder. "Mrs. Hale, Mr. Hale, I am placing you both under formal notice of investigation. You will surrender your passports within 24 hours. You will vacate this residence within 48 hours. You will have no unsupervised contact with Dr. Mercer. Violation of any of these conditions will result in immediate arrest." He closed the folder. "Do you understand?" Sloane did not answer. She stared at the birthday cake. The candles had burned down to the frosting, and 2 thin trails of blue wax ran across the white surface like veins draining from a heart that had stopped beating. Bennett nodded. Once. The nod of a man signing a consent form he finally understood. Salinas turned to me. "Dr. Mercer, the DA's office will contact you within 72 hours to schedule a formal statement. You have the right to pursue criminal charges to the fullest extent. You also have the right to request leniency. The decision is yours." I looked at my daughter. I looked at the candles melting into the cake. I looked at the pearls in my hand. "I will think about it," I said. But I already knew. They left in stages. The way vital signs decline on a monitor 1 line at a time, each departure making the silence deeper. Salinas went first. He shook my hand at the front door, with a grip that said everything his professional language could not. He looked at me for 2 seconds, the look of a man who has seen what families do to each other, and has never learned to stop being surprised by it, and walked to his sedan on Whitaker Street. The engine started. The headlights swept across the front of the house like a searchlight passing over a building that had survived a storm. Bennett went next. He stood in the hallway with his car keys in his right hand and his left hand hanging at his side like a limb that had lost its nerve supply. He looked at me. His mouth opened, closed. The unfinished sentence from Sunday was still in there. The question he could not ask. The forgiveness he could not request. The confession that had finally been spoken, but would never be enough. "Good night, Bennett," I said. He nodded. Walked through the door. Did not look back. His car pulled away slowly. The taillights red and shrinking until they turned the corner and disappeared, the way a pulse disappears from a flat line gradually. Then, completely. Sloane was last. She stood at the bottom of the stairs with a suitcase she had packed in 11 minutes. 11 minutes. The same duration as Catherine's video. I did not think the symmetry was intentional, but the surgeon in me noted it anyway, the way I noted every number, every interval, every rhythm that passed through my field of observation. She had changed out of the black dress and into jeans and a gray sweatshirt. Catherine's pearls were on the dining table where I had placed them. Without the dress, without the pearls, without the camera and the performance, Sloane looked smaller, not younger. Smaller. The way a tumor looks smaller when the imaging contrast fades, and all that remains is the shadow of what it actually is. "I need to get some things from upstairs," she said. "You have 48 hours. Take what is yours." "Dan, do not call me that tonight." The sentence came out steady. No tremor. No raised volume. The same tone I used when a resident made a critical error in the operating room. Not anger. Not punishment. Just the removal of permission to pretend the error had not occurred. She picked up the suitcase. She opened the front door. The night air came in warm, humid, carrying the scent of jasmine from Catherine's garden. Sloane stepped onto the porch and turned. "I didn't want it to be like this," she said. I looked at her. My daughter. The girl who drew hearts on my lunch bag. The woman who had poisoned me for 14 months. Fabricated my decline. Stolen my money. And loosened the screws on a towel bar so that I would fall in the dark and crack my skull on the floor where her mother used to kneel every Sunday morning. "Neither did I said. She walked to her car. The door closed. The engine started. And then the street was empty, and the house was quiet. And I was standing in the doorway of a home that had once held 4 heartbeats. Catherine's. Mine. Sloane's. And the one we lost at 11 weeks that we never spoke about but never forgot, and now held only one. I closed the door. The lock turned. The sound was small and mechanical and necessary. Thomas was the last to leave the dining room. He had gathered the evidence envelopes, the flash drive, the portfolio, and the unsigned guardianship petition into his briefcase. Castellano, Tron, and Price had exited through the garden gate 20 minutes earlier. Quiet, professional. Their work complete. Harriet stood in the kitchen doorway. She had not spoken since the team entered. She had watched the entire confrontation, the way a scrub nurse watches a surgery present. Essential. Invisible. "I'll clean up," she said. "You don't have to." "I know." She began clearing the table. The roast chicken. Untouched. The green beans. Cold. The birthday cake with its melted candles and blue wax veins. She moved through the kitchen with the efficiency of a woman who had cleaned this house for 8 years and understood that some messes are made of dishes and some are made of choices. I walked to Catherine's study. I sat in the reading chair. The USB drive was still in the laptop. The screen was dark. The cream-colored envelope lay open on the desk. Catherine's handwriting facing up. I reached for the laptop and pressed play. Catherine appeared again. Blue cardigan, thin hair, pale face. The same 11 minutes and 42 seconds. But this time, I did not listen for the evidence. I did not listen for the plan. I listened for her voice. Just her voice. The way it rose on certain syllables. The way it softened when she said my name. The way it broke. Once. At the 9-minute mark. When she said the words that would live inside me longer than any diagnosis I had ever made. Save yourself. Franklin. That is my last prescription. I closed the laptop. I placed Catherine's pearls on the desk beside her note. I turned off the light. The house was quiet. The birthday was over. And somewhere in the dark, the garden was waiting. Tuesday morning. The first morning in 14 months that no one knocked on my door with a pill in their palm. I woke at 5:47, not from a fall, not from pain, not from the sound of laughter through a ceiling. I woke because the light came through the bedroom window and touched my face the way it used to before Sloane moved in gently, without agenda, carrying nothing but the promise of a day that belonged entirely to me. I lay still for a long time. The house was silent, not the silence of someone sleeping upstairs, not the silence of someone pretending, the silence of absence complete, permanent, and strangely merciful. I got up. I made coffee. I stood at the kitchen counter and drank it slowly, looking at the garden through the window. Catherine's roses had grown wild for 14 months. The canes had crossed over each other, thorns tangled with blooms, dead wood choking new growth. A garden left untended does not die. It becomes something else, something that still holds the shape of what it was, but no longer serves the purpose for which it was planted. At 7:15, I walked outside. The morning air was warm and thick with humidity. The jasmine along the fence was blooming. A mockingbird sat on the garden gate, the gate with the ceramic frog, the spare key, the entrance that had saved my life and sang 3 notes before flying to the live oak at the edge of the property. I knelt beside the first rose bush. Catherine had planted it the year Sloane was born. A hybrid tea called Mr. Lincoln Deep Red. Fragrant. The kind of rose that demands attention and rewards patience. The canes had grown to 6 feet. Half of them were dead. The other half were fighting for sunlight through a tangle of growth that had not been pruned since the last time Catherine's hands had touched them. I took the pruning shears from the garden, shed the same pair Catherine had used, the handles worn smooth by her grip, and I began to cut. Dead wood first. I removed every cane that had dried and hardened, every branch that no longer carried life. The cuts were clean, angled, a 1/4 inch above the outward-facing bud, the way Catherine had taught me the spring after we bought this house. She said pruning was not about removing what was dead. It was about deciding what deserved to live. I worked for 2 hours, 11 rose bushes, each one a year, a memory, a conversation Catherine and I had while she knelt in the dirt, and I stood beside her, holding tools I did not yet know how to use. The Mr. Lincoln for Sloane's birth, the double delight for our 20th anniversary. The peace rose she planted the week I performed my 1000th surgery. The pale pink Eden she put in the ground the morning after her diagnosis. When she looked at me across the breakfast table and said, "I am going to plant something that will outlive both of us." By 9:30, the garden was clear. The dead wood lay in a pile beside the shed. The living canes stood upright, breathing, reaching toward sunlight they had not seen in over a year. The garden was not restored. Restoration takes seasons, but it was open again. Ready, I went inside. I showered. I dressed in clean clothes, not the navy blazer, not the gray trousers. A simple white shirt and khaki pants. The clothes of a man who was not preparing for surgery or for battle. The clothes of a man who was beginning something. I sat in Catherine's reading chair. The laptop was closed. The USB drive was in the desk drawer. The cream-colored envelope lay open on the desk. And inside it, beneath the note I had already read, was a second piece of paper I had not noticed the night before. I unfolded it. Catherine's handwriting. Blue ink. Smaller than the note. More private. As if she had written it not for the man who would execute the plan, but for the husband who would sit alone afterward and wonder what to do with the rest of his life. Franklin, if you are reading this second page, then it is over. The surgery is done. The patient survived. Now I need you to hear something you will not want to hear. Let her go. Not because she deserves forgiveness. Not because what she did can be repaired. But because carrying her inside you, the anger, the betrayal, the question of what you did wrong will become a weight that no heart, not even yours, was built to carry forever. You did not fail her. You loved her. Those are not the same sentence, but people confuse them all the time. Go back to the garden. Plant something new. Not for me, not for her. For the man you still have time to become. All my love, across all the distance. Catherine. I folded the letter. I placed it inside the envelope. I held the envelope against my chest, the way I used to hold her carefully. Completely. Knowing that what I was holding was both fragile and infinite. Then I picked up the phone and dialed Thomas Beckett. Thomas, I said, I've made my decision. 3 weeks later, I stood in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building on Bull Street and signed my name for the first time since the night I refused to sign Sloane's documents. The pen was different. The paper was different. The name was the same. But the man holding the pen was not. Thomas Beckett sat to my left. Gordon Price sat to my right. Harriet Dawson stood by the window, watching the Savannah River catch the afternoon light, the way she had once watched vital signs catch the rhythm of a stabilizing heart. Dr. Castellano had sent a letter of support from Atlanta, 2 paragraphs, handwritten, ending with a line I would frame and hang in my office. The strongest hearts are the ones that keep beating after they have every reason to stop. The document before me was 17 pages long. Articles of incorporation, charitable trust bylaws, tax-exempt designation application, Board of Trustees, Judge Thomas Beckett, Chair, Gordon Price, Treasurer, Harriet Dawson, Director of Patient Advocacy, Franklin Mercer, Founding Trustee. The name at the top of the first page, in bold letters, read, The Catherine Mercer Medical Trust. Its mission to provide legal, medical, and financial protection for elderly patients subjected to pharmaceutical manipulation, guardian abuse, or financial exploitation by family members or caregivers. Free evaluation. Free forensic accounting. Free legal counsel. The 3 tracks Catherine had built to save one man, now extended to save as many as the funding would allow. I signed the last page. The pen touched the paper, and I felt Catherine's hand on mine, not literally, not spiritually, not in any way I could defend in a medical journal. But the sensation was there. The warmth, the steadiness, the quiet authority of a woman who had spent 39 years teaching a surgeon that the most important organ in the body is not the heart. It is the conscience. Price filed the documents that afternoon. The trust's first donation came from the sale of the commercial property on which Sloan and Bennett had placed a deposit using my stolen money. The court had frozen the LLC's assets within 72 hours of the investigation. The property reverted to my estate. I sold it for $1.1 million and transferred every cent into the trust's operating account. Sloan was indicted on 4 counts: elder financial exploitation, forgery, identity fraud, aggravated assault. Bennett was indicted on 2 accessory to financial exploitation and forgery. He cooperated fully with the district attorney. His testimony confirmed every detail Tron and Price had documented. The printout he had found in Sloan's nightstand, How to Simulate Cognitive Decline in Elderly Patients, was entered into evidence as Exhibit 47. I did not attend the hearings. Thomas went on my behalf. He reported the facts. I listened. I did not ask about Sloan's face. I did not ask about her voice. I did not ask whether she wore the black dress or whether her chin trembled on cue. Some things a surgeon does not need to see twice to understand. Catherine's letter lived in my breast pocket. I carried it the way some men carry photographs, not to look at, but to know it was there. Her words had become a kind of pulse, steady and invisible, reminding me with every step that love is not the absence of betrayal. Love is what remains after betrayal has taken everything it came for. On a Saturday morning in November, I returned to the garden. The rose bushes I had pruned 3 weeks earlier were already showing new growth, small green buds emerging from canes that had looked dead but were only dormant. The Mr. Lincoln had produced a single bloom, deep red, fragrant. It stood at the top of the tallest cane like a heart that had been restarted after a long silence. Harriet arrived at 9 with 2 cups of coffee and a bag of bulbs, tulips, daffodils, crocuses, spring flowers, the kind that sleep underground through winter and emerge when the cold has passed. Catherine would have liked these, she said. Catherine would have planted them herself and told me I was holding the trowel wrong. Harriet laughed. The sound was clean and unrehearsed, and it moved through the garden like sunlight through leaves. We planted for 2 hours, side by side. No medical charts, no legal pads, no locked drawers, just dirt and roots, and the quiet work of putting something into the ground and trusting that it would grow. When we finished, I stood at the garden gate and looked at the house, the same porch, the same window where Catherine's orchids still sat on the sill. But the house was different now. The way a patient is different after surgery, the structure is the same. But what was killing it has been removed. I closed the gate. The ceramic frog sat on the post, still holding the spare key that had let Harriet in the morning she saved my life. I left the key where it was. Some doors should never be locked. I went inside. I sat in Catherine's chair. I opened the laptop. I deleted the video file. Not because I wanted to forget her, because I didn't need a screen to hear her voice. She was in the garden now. She was in the roses. She was in every bulb we had just placed beneath the soil, and she was in the trust that bore her name, 3 tracks of protection, running like arteries through a system she had designed to keep beating long after her own heart had stopped. I closed the laptop. I looked out the window. The Mr. Lincoln Rose caught the light. A surgeon knows when the operation is over. Not because the wound is closed, because the patient is breathing on his own. I was breathing